Hello everyone. Great to be here. Finally made it to America. Lifelong dream. So I'm the Chief Statistician of Qantas and Qantas Loyalty. Now Qantas Loyalty is the part of the company that looks after our members. We've got about 10 million members in Australia. I know that thwarts in comparison to the US, but nonetheless it is a very effective frequent flyer program. And I'm also in charge of all quantitative research and experimental methods for the airline itself. Now, we have approximately 30 million transactions a day, and they are from our partners in airline transactions. And when we convert that to metadata, we have something like 50 million transactions a day that we have to contend with. And that is revealed preference data or historical data that's a result of what people do. So survey data or stated preference data in the form of preference elicitation is very important for us to get accurate. In other words, we want survey data to be reflective of consumer preferences to the extent that we can then predict what people will do. So historical data tells us what people have done. Survey data tells us what people are likely to do and why they've done that. And it's important for us so we can then start predicting what products and services our consumers and then the general population will buy or interact with. And in particular, latent forecasting, which is a form of experimental methodology that allows us then to use surrogates to predict what people will do. To that end, PC research is on the way out, as we all know it. Mobile research is in. And we need to know, as an organisation, whether the representativeness or the validity of mobile research compares and competes with PC. So that's the purpose of this talk today, to understand whether the comparability and the validity and representativeness of mobile research is intact, is tractable when compared to PC research. So we'll have a look at what motivated us to conduct a study of some 10,000 observations or 10,000 respondents globally to make these tests possible. We're going to see what we tested. We're going to look at some results which act as surrogates of validity, and then we're going to also stretch that with more advanced statistical models to show us that there are differences or no differences between the modalities of smartphone or mobile device research and PC research. And I hope you find those findings interesting. And then we'll look at some benefits and some caveats along those lines. So what inspired us? Well, there are a lot of myths out there, and you would have heard those myths from our panel that most recently spoke about only 2 questions, or only 3 questions, or only 5 questions, and only 2 or 3 minutes, or 5 minutes. These are myths at best. Myths. This compelled us to carry out a case study. Now, we have already published our work in the Asia data, and the Asia data comprised of Japan, Korea, and China. And we'll look at the sample sizes shortly. And today we're going to examine the West, if we like, US, Australia, and the UK, to see if these differences actually exist. We hear them all the time. Oh, you can't do long surveys. You know, people aren't going to be able to fit all the questions on the screen. You can only ask a certain amount of questions. That's rubbish. That is plain rubbish. Why? Because the psychometric training that people have in constructing surveys is practically zero. And we'll see the impact of that. Now, the myths that we're going to address today. 3 myths. Myth 1, long surveys can't be done on mobiles. That is a myth. PC results, in other words, survey results from computers or PCs, laptops if we like, or desktops, differ to mobile. No, they don't. They don't differ. And myth 3, which is born from myth 2, is that mobile data are not representative or valid, or they're different. They're not different. If it's done properly, they're not different. So, again, what's the motivation of the study? Well, because of the importance of mobile devices. Mobile devices are an extension of our modern self. Mobile devices mean something about who we are. The mobile device that we use says something about us, whether it's an iPhone or a smartphone or a phablet or a large screen or a small screen or the color, the way that we use it, the way that we show it. It is part of us. A PC may be part of us, but it's not always with us. It's not always with us. Now, there's 40 to 70% penetration in the US on mobile devices, particularly smartphones. The penetration levels nearly as high as 80% for younger people. And why is that important? Because younger people have been traditionally harder to penetrate, and mobile devices allow us to overcome that. Now, 56% in the US penetration, Australia 65, UK 49, and so on and so forth. So we know that these guys are on the increase. In fact, we expect something like nearly 200 million smartphone devices or mobile devices active within 2 years from today. So what we tested 3 things. SMOSM means smartphone users that were invited on their smartphone to participate in a survey on a smartphone. Number 2, SMAPC, smartphone users that were invited on their smartphone to participate on a survey on a PC. And lastly, PC surveys. So we conducted 1 test and we had 3 modalities. So smartphone people that were invited on their smartphone to do the survey on the smartphone, the same survey on people that use smartphones but invited on their smartphone to do the survey on a PC, and then PC. So these are the 3 modalities we'll be testing throughout my talk. Here's an example, as we all know it, of a iPhone survey question on gender. And here we're asking, I've only put 2 genders up instead of 4. So here we're asking whether you're male or female. Again, this is a slightly more complex question on how many banks. We would now like to ask you about some questions on banking. How many financial institutions do you have? 1, 2, 3, or 4. Immediately we can see that in comparison to, say, a confirmant study that's done on PC, the mobile device is a lot clearer. A lot clearer. It may not have a lot of white space, but it's a lot clearer. And if handled correctly, if the questions are impregnated with psychometric validity, then I would attest to the fact of accuracy being higher in mobiles than what it is on PCs, but we'll see the results soon. The types of questions that we asked in this case study of about 10,000 respondents were penetration questions, satisfaction, recommendation, attitudes, and demographics. Bread and butter stuff, right? Bread and butter stuff. And we used a mix of response type options. Single selection, multiple selection, drop-down grid, open-ended, and 2 types of rating scales, Likert type monadic rating scales, scale of 1 to 5, and a scale of 1 to 10 to satisfy NPS. And these are the sample numbers that we got in our study for the global focus. We had 2,000 respondents in the US, and again, the top line is people that were invited on their smartphone. In other words, smartphone users that were invited on their smartphone to do the study on a smartphone. The second row is people that were invited on their smartphone to do a study on a PC, and then PC users. So in the US, 2,000, Australia, 1,500, UK, 2,500, and so on and so forth. So let's look at the results. If we look at the 3 categories on the x-axis, we see USA and Australia and then UK. So USA on the left. Now, in terms of enjoyment, the US respondents tend to be a bit more conservative. They're more advanced. So in the US, people are more advanced, they're more technologically savvy, they're more grounded, and they have a higher deterministic property of decision-making and sequence allocation. So we can see here that the top 2 boxes, in other words, on a 5-point scale, I enjoyed the survey, filling it out, and it was okay. All instances across countries and across modalities are above 90%. In some cases, 95% across the board. So there's no immediate issue about enjoyment in the survey between PC and smartphone. Tick 1 on validity. Repeatability. Are you likely to do this survey again? Well, here we can see great consistency, and the percentages of the top boxes are over 95% in most instances. So whether you're from the US, Australia, or UK, irrespective of modality, there's no difference in you being positioned to repeat the study again. It wasn't computationally burdensome or cognitively incompatible with what you're asked to do. So there's a consistency amongst the likelihood to do the survey again. In terms of dropout rates, now look at the second last line, 21% and 22%. Prima facie, there is no difference in dropout rates of this survey. You know how long this survey was? 15 minutes. Now, I've pushed surveys on mobiles up to 45 minutes, and I've done experimental design, complex multi-level experimental designs in choice experiments, and structural equation segmentation, which have taken, as I said, up to 50 minutes on a mobile device, and I get absolute perfect results when I compare them to PC. And I use PC just as a litmus test to see if my results are consistent. Now, admittedly, starting a survey may have a higher dropout rate on PC. Why? Because the engagement factor may not be as high as mobile. You're not getting the survey on a device that's part of you. Now, people are conditioned to far more cognitively computational burden at a higher level on mobiles. Why? Because their heads are stuck in the device. People are using their device ad infinitum, late at night, on the way to work. They are interacting with their device. It is a natural extension of self in today's world. Now, finally, we may get some type of wear out, but again, it's in the very low figures for smartphones. All in all, though, no dropout rate differences. Remember, a 15-minute survey, and there are 3 categories in this survey. Category 1 refers to mobile phones, Category 2 refers to financial institutions, and Category 3 refers to motor vehicle insurance. So it's a comprehensive study, quite comprehensive. So in terms of the variability or the variance associated with the results reporting back to the consumer, we carried out extensive analysis. And I won't go into all the types of analyses that we conducted because of time, but I will say that we went down the path of data mining, ensemble models, random forest, tree net, various card situations, and then segmentation and a variety of GLMs, and most of the types of discrete statistical regression models that we can think of to really put the pressure on this. And why? Because, as I said, we have 50 million transactions a day that occur. And I need to be sure that my team can predict highly latent factors of consumer take-up of products and services. I didn't do this for the sake of the presentation. I applied this rigor because we turn over billions of dollars each quarter, and I need to be sure that my predictions are correct. So I'm doing this purely for a selfish reason, not for the sake of marketing. We used NPS as the first robust comparison of means. Now, Table 5 refers to satisfaction across country, by category, by modality. Remember, modality were the 3 modalities, SMO, SM, SMA, PC, and PC. We found no differences across the 3 countries in terms of satisfaction, except for insurance. And I would probably suggest that that's because of the abundance of insurance offers here in the States. However, when we look at recommendation, and both of these questions, satisfaction and recommendation, can be used interchangeably for NPS, we found absolutely no statistical differences whatsoever. When we look at the means for satisfaction alone, for brevity, we see, even if we rotate, in other words, have a block rotation due to the categories that we covered, the means are practically identical except for block 4 in the first row, which is statistically significantly different to 3.91 and 3.89. These are the means. And let me say one more thing. These are also non-trimmed means, which means that I've allowed maximum variability and maximum distributional anomalies to occur. I've occasioned those. I've said, let's leave it alone. Let's see what it does. Additionally, what we haven't presented here is that these are all already being tested by medians as well. So if we test a median, it's impervious to distributional anomalies. But the medians equal the means, which means they are nearly normally distributed and highly reliable. What does this mean? No difference between smartphone, mobile devices and PC. What did we hear before? Massive differences. You know what? No differences. Next, we used logit models. Are we okay with logistic regression in here? We okay with regressions? Anyone experienced regression other than a psychological session? No? If you don't want to answer, point to someone in the front and tell me that that's who's not experienced it. All right, so in this particular instance, what I did is I grouped my smartphone and called all the respondents that had a smartphone 1, and then I grouped my respondents that did their survey on a PC and I called that 0, and I predicted smartphone and PC by attitudes towards technology. Now, the first attitude is difficulty in keeping up with emails. I don't like using Twitter. Online is the future. Web is limited. Personal relationships are better than mobile connections, right? Now, I've got a personal interest in that because I don't believe that personal relationships are better than electronic connections. Who's seen the movie Her? Has anyone seen the movie Her? Well, that movie was modelled on me. Okay? I'm waiting for the cash. I haven't got the cash. I'm going to LA next to knock on doors. Privacy concerns, personal interest in IT, tech savvy. I like SMS abbreviations. I love those because that's called plausible deniability. If you need to communicate to anyone, never communicate in words, always in SMS. That's not what I meant. Okay? You can always hide behind that. I read on technology devices. I seek in file blocks. So what I've presented here are the significant statistics on the prediction of smartphone as opposed to PC. And what we can see, or maybe we can't see it immediately, is that there is consistency. And let me make this consistency a bit more clear. These are my Z values, in other words, my statistically significant quantities that are predicting the attitudes. And the attitudes that I had on the y-axis before are now on the x-axis. There are 11 attitudes. The only anomalous aspect of these trends is that I don't like using, or I like using Twitter. And we see that in the US, people use Twitter a lot more than what they do in Australia and in the UK. The main takeout of this slide is that there are no differences in modality across countries, even for attitudes. So we can say that there is no need to adjust our sample, adjust the data that comes from mobile to make it look like PC, because they look the same. They look the same. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm excited about that because it's one less thing I need to worry about. So we had some myths to disprove in the beginning. 3 myths. We said that long surveys can't be done on mobiles. Cross. That's not correct. That PC results differ to mobiles. No, they don't. According to our results, sample of 10,000. It may not be the biggest sample, but I would put it to you that it's quite a reasonable sample. And mobile data are not representative or valid. Not correct. Can a longer survey, e.g. 15 minutes, be done on a mobile? Yes, enjoyment is high. I have taken significant segmentation and choice experimental studies, which I've designed, up to 50 minutes on a mobile, and then tested them with PC, and there are no differences. What kind of surveys can be done on a mobile? Well, all kinds, provided the software adjusts for the screen size real estate variability amongst devices. If the software used to design the survey is not kind and agnostic, as the panel mentioned before, to the type of device, then we're in trouble. But if it is, it's green lights, all systems go. Are the data valid? We've shown that the data are valid. Similar results were achieved. Are the data representative of the population? Yes. However, we must weight by age and gender as the minimum criterion for representativeness between smartphones and PCs. So the benefits of smartphone research, they're device independent, or they can be device independent if they're designed properly. They're convenient for respondents and they're more immediate and they're faster. and they're accessing younger and harder to reach demographics. Now, we think that someone that's 60 years of age and over is old. Let me tell you, in a few years to come, people aged 90 years and over are going to be old. Our superannuation system in Australia only caters for people between the age of 60 and 80. We don't have a superannuation system back in Australia for people aged between 80 and 100. And we're in trouble. Now, I don't know the lifespan here in the States, but I would assume that it is growing, is it not? Excellent. So, mobile devices, smartphones, are a favourite for people that are not physically and attitudinally and intellectually as mobile as those that are. And we find that because we do a lot of research with asthmatics, and asthmatics are less mobile and they're more friendly towards mobile devices, as are people with physical impairments. So, there's an increased reach as smartphone penetration increases. There's a cost effectiveness, and it's not invasive, and it's got features that lend to more capabilities. Why? Because it is embedded in social media. It is embedded as part of our natural extensions. There may be some caveats. At the moment, the smaller screens might be a bit of an issue if we don't design the survey properly, but according to IHS, 146 million phablets will be in the market within 2 years' time. There is some evidence that there are some higher dropout rates with more complex questions, such as grids and multiple selection. But if the surveys are designed correctly, that's not an issue. I've had grid questions with up to 7 columns and 19 rows, and they are quite successful. And actually, I'm testing now 24 columns and 8 rows to actually get them to be successful. And we need to adapt the questions and the software, as I said, to a smaller screen. And at the moment, there's a smaller pool of potential respondents, but that will change. And we may need to calibrate the results according to mobile brand level. For instance, in Asia, we would need to calibrate back to an iPhone. In the States, we would need to calibrate back to a smartphone Android, because there are certain preferences, and they may need to be reweighted. So finally, there's no limit, according to my findings, about a short 5-minute survey not being extendable. Okay? That doesn't mean that we can't extend them. We can't do surveys for 15 minutes. That's just not on. And I will say this, and this is no reflection on anything that's been said today. Unless the survey is designed to be psychometrically tractable and psychologically compatible with computational cognitive burden, then it doesn't matter what study we do, the results aren't going to work. If the study is designed properly and professionals are designing the study, people that have studied these areas, then your surveys will not be biased in any way. So the limitations are based, I would suggest, that I would put it to you, based on historical software limitations which are quickly catching up. Anyone can do their survey at any time. It can be fun and likely to retain respondents. Why is it likely to retain respondents? Because it's a device that's a natural extension of self. People don't have to sit down and purposely do a study on a computer. It's instant. They can do it at any time. And it provides valid data. So I would suggest that smartphone research or mobile devices is most certainly a viable alternative to PC. Questions, please.
Thank you very much, Con. Thank you. Now, there's been some incredibly topical... been some very topical comments that you've made in your piece. So I'm wondering if we've got any questions for Con from the floor.
Hi, I noticed that you commented that more complex surveys maybe had lower completion rates, but it seems like it's true across the board, that on a mobile device there's lower completion rates than is true on a PC.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
Did you find any evidence that that across the board mobile devices have lower completion rates than PC?
No. We spoke about the dropout rates being approximately identical, so not as yet. However, if the surveys are not designed correctly, the dropout rates will increase with mobiles.
Thank you.
We'll just take one more question from that gentleman over there in the black, and then we'll move on for the sake of time.
Hi, you mentioned that you tested open-end questions. I was wondering if you could discuss any differences that you saw in either the length or the quality of the open-end text that you received.
Sorry, repeat that question, especially the last part.
Any differences that you saw in open-end comments, either the length or the quality of the comments with the free text?
So we're talking about verbatim data, open text, free-form data? Yeah, okay. So on a mobile device, the language that's used tends to be a lot more abbreviated than on PC. But if the text analytics approach is one that relies on the corpus, in other words, it relies on the language of the data, it doesn't use external dictionaries or thesauri, then there is no differences in validity. So the extraction process that has to be dedicated to the language that's used in the corpus or corpora at any one time. For instance, I can't apply an external dictionary or set of thesauruses to any text because the text varies. So therefore, what I'm going to find are biases. But if the text analytics approach uses dictionaries that are formed from the verbatim data in each instance of analysis, then the results are unbiased. Am I making sense? Let me repeat myself. Most text mining and text analytics and text forecasting approaches use external dictionaries that have been formulated, and they have a certain amount of stop words, in other words, stop words, words that are removed. They have a certain number of words in the dictionaries for every language in question. The text mining approach, though, has to be dictionary and thesaurus agnostic. Because remember, text mining, in other words, looking at verbatim data, text mining is a transformation of language to numerical quantities, and those quantities have different magnitudes. So we could potentially analyze, the type of approach that I use could analyze the sounds that whales make, which is one of the things that I'm doing now. So I am analyzing the language that whales use to communicate to each other, to test the agnostic aspect of text mining using dictionaries that are formed in a dedicated fashion from the verbatim data that's produced in a survey. So done correctly, there are no biases and no differences. Believe it or not.
Well, that's going to be an interesting paper for you to come and present in the future then.
Right.
Thank you very much, Con.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.